Isaac Brennan had not felt his legs in 2 days. The gangrene from the rattlesnake bite had spread so far up his thigh that he could smell his own flesh rotting through the fever. And when he finally dragged himself to the irrigation ditch behind his failing cornfield in the brutal summer of 1871, he saw the Apache boy bleeding in the water and understood with perfect clarity that saving this child would be the act that destroyed everything he had left in this world. The boy could not have been more than 12 years old, his chest torn open by what looked like a rifle shot, his black hair matted with blood and ditch water. And Isaac knew without question that helping him would bring the wrath of every settler within 50 miles down on his head, because less than a month ago, Apaches had burned the Davidson homestead and left 2 children dead in the ashes. Isaac's own farm was 3 bad seasons away from total failure. His wife, Martha, had left him 6 months earlier for a shopkeeper in Tucson. And the neighbors already whispered that he was cursed or weak, or possibly mad for trying to grow corn in this merciless Arizona Territory soil, where nothing but mesquite and hatred seemed to thrive. But the boy's eyes were open and watching him with an animal terror that Isaac recognized from his own reflection in the water barrel each morning. And in that moment of recognition, between a poor farmer drowning in debt and an injured Apache child drowning in blood, Isaac Brennan made the choice that would teach the West something savage about what it means to be human when everything around you demands you be a monster instead. If stories of impossible moral choices in the face of hatred and fear speak to something deep in your soul, subscribe now, because this journey will show you what one poor farmer risked when the West demanded he choose sides, and he chose mercy instead. Isaac pulled the boy from the ditch with hands that shook from fever and terror in equal measure, his own infected legs screaming with each movement as he carried the child toward his miserable one-room cabin that sat like a scar on 40 acres of dust and broken dreams. The Apache boy weighed almost nothing, his ribs visible through his torn skin, and Isaac could feel the heat of infection radiating from the gunshot wound that had punched through his shoulder and exited near his spine. The West in 1871 was a place where such choices were not just discouraged, but actively punished, where the territorial governor had recently declared that peaceful relations with Apaches were impossible, and where men like Isaac, who showed mercy to the enemy, were considered traitors to their own kind. He kicked open the cabin door and laid the boy on his own straw mattress, the only bed in the house, and as he began tearing strips from his one good shirt to make bandages, Isaac thought about the fact that this injured child represented everything the settlers feared and hated, every burned home and murdered family, every broken treaty and violent raid that had turned this land into a graveyard of mutual atrocity. The boy watched him with eyes that held no trust, only the blank wariness of something that has learned the world offers nothing but pain. And Isaac found himself talking in a low voice as he cleaned the wound with whiskey that burned like liquid fire. He told the boy about his corn, about how he had been a poor farmer in Ohio before coming west with dreams of land and prosperity, about how those dreams had died slowly under the Arizona sun, while his wife's love had died even faster. He did not know if the Apache child understood English, did not know if his words meant anything beyond the tone of voice, but he kept talking because the silence felt too much like the moment before violence, and Isaac had seen enough violence to last a dozen lifetimes. The wound was bad, the kind of injury that killed men in days if infection set in, and Isaac knew his own medical knowledge was limited to what he had learned treating injured livestock and his own countless failures at keeping things alive in this hostile land. But he cleaned the wound as best he could, packed it with the last of the honey he had been saving, and wrapped the boy's thin chest with strips of cloth that had once been white but were now the color of red dirt and old sweat. Outside his cabin window, Isaac could see the dying corn stalks that represented his third failed harvest, the withered plants standing like grave markers in rows that stretched toward the mountains where the Apache band still moved free, despite the Army's best efforts to contain them. The West had been savage to Isaac Brennan, had taken his money and his wife and his hope, and given him nothing but calluses and debt, and the reputation as the fool who thought he could farm desert. But now, the West was asking him to be savage in return, to see this injured boy as the enemy rather than as a child bleeding on his mattress. He could hear his nearest neighbor, a man named Taggart who ran cattle on land stolen from a Mexican family, telling him 3 months ago that the only good Apache was a dead Apache, that mercy was weakness, and weakness got you killed out here, where civilization was just a word people used to justify their own cruelty. The boy's breathing was shallow and rapid, his skin hot enough to hurt, when Isaac pressed his palm to the child's forehead. And Isaac knew that keeping him alive would require more than bandages, and hope would require a commitment to protecting this Apache child from a world that wanted him dead. The sun was setting when Isaac heard the horses, 4 riders coming up the long path to his cabin, and he recognized Taggart's voice even before he saw the man's face. They had come looking for the Apache boy, had tracked the blood trail from wherever the child had been shot, and now they sat on their horses outside Isaac's door, demanding he hand over what they called a murdering savage. Isaac stepped out of his cabin on legs that barely held him, his own infected wound making every movement feel like walking through fire, and he faced 4 armed men with nothing but his stubbornness and a choice he had already made. Taggart was a thick man with a beard the color of rust and eyes that held all the certainty of someone who had never questioned whether his hatred was justified. And he told Isaac in a voice loud enough for the other riders to hear that the boy had been part of a raiding party that had stolen horses from a ranch 20 miles south, that he deserved hanging or shooting or whatever rough justice the West provided for Apache thieves and murderers. Isaac listened to the accusation and thought about the child on his mattress, thought about the fact that 12 years old was too young to have committed all the crimes the West wanted to lay at his feet, and he said in a voice steadier than he felt that the boy was injured and under his protection, and that they would have to kill him to get past his door. The words hung in the air like gun smoke, and Isaac saw the surprise on Taggart's face give way to something darker, the realization that this poor farmer with the failing corn crop and the infected leg was willing to die for an Apache child he did not know. The other riders shifted in their saddles, men Isaac recognized from town, men who had families and farms and reasons to be angry about Apache raids, but men who also seemed uncertain about whether they were willing to shoot a neighbor over this particular fight. Taggart leaned forward in his saddle and asked Isaac if he had lost his mind, if the fever had rotted his brain along with his leg, if he understood that protecting this savage meant choosing Apaches over his own people, Isaac felt the weight of that question, felt the way it tried to force him into a corner where there were only two sides, and choosing humanity meant betraying your tribe. And he said that the boy was a child, just a child, and that whatever crimes had been committed by Apache raiders did not change the fact that letting a 12-year-old bleed to death was murder, no matter what justifications you wrapped around it. He said it knowing it would not convince Taggart, knowing that men who needed the world to be simple would never accept the complexity of mercy. But he said it anyway, because sometimes the only power a poor farmer has is the power to stand in a doorway and refuse to move. The standoff lasted maybe 2 minutes, but felt like hours. 4 mounted men with rifles against one sick farmer with nothing but conviction. And then Taggart spat in the dirt and said that Isaac had made his choice, that he was choosing to be an enemy of decent people, and that when the Apache boy recovered, he would probably murder Isaac in his sleep, because that was what savages did to fools who showed them kindness. The riders left in a cloud of dust and threats, and Isaac stood watching them go until his legs gave out and he collapsed against the cabin door, his whole body shaking with fever and fear, and the knowledge that he had just made himself an outcast from the only community he had. Inside the cabin, the Apache boy was still breathing, still fighting the infection that wanted to claim his life, and Isaac crawled back to the bedside and resumed his vigil, wiping the child's forehead with a damp cloth and trying to pour water between lips that barely moved. The West had shown Isaac what it meant to be savage, had shown him that survival often demanded you abandon the parts of yourself that made you human. But in choosing to save this injured boy, Isaac was discovering that sometimes the most savage thing you can do is refuse to let the world turn you into a monster. 3 days passed in a fever dream where Isaac could no longer tell if his own sickness or the boy's was worse, where he would wake on the floor beside the mattress with no memory of falling asleep, where the line between delirium and reality blurred, until he sometimes thought he saw Martha standing in the doorway, telling him he was a fool for throwing away his life over an Apache child. The boy's fever broke on the 4th day, his eyes opening with a clarity that had been absent before, and Isaac felt a surge of relief so powerful it brought tears to his face. He tried to feed the child broth made from a chicken he could barely afford to kill, holding the bowl steady while small sips went down. And in those moments of simple caretaking, Isaac forgot about the failing farm and the angry neighbors and the fact that he was now marked as an Apache lover in a territory where that designation could get you killed. The boy spoke on the 5th day, a single word in Spanish that Isaac recognized as water, and the sound of that voice, thin and young and undeniably human, made something break open in Isaac's chest. He brought water and helped the child drink, and then, in a mixture of Spanish and gestures, they began the slow process of communication. The boy's name was something that sounded like Nolly, and he was indeed 12 years old, the son of an Apache woman and a Mexican father who had been killed by soldiers 2 summers ago. He had been with a group of Apache boys learning to hunt when they stumbled onto the ranch where horses were kept, and the shooting had started before anyone thought about whether these were children or warriors, whether this was a raid or simply boys being curious about the animals. Nolly had run, had been shot in the back while running away, and had crawled miles before collapsing in Isaac's irrigation ditch. Pause here and answer me this. What would you have done in Isaac's place, knowing that mercy toward this child would cost you everything? Knowing that the West demanded you choose hatred over humanity, could you have stood in that doorway against armed men defending an Apache boy you did not know? Tell me in the comments what you would risk for a stranger's child. The weeks that followed taught Isaac that the West could be savage in ways that went beyond physical violence, that exile from your own kind was its own form of death. No one came to buy his corn, though it finally began growing after a freak rainstorm broke the drought. No one would sell him supplies at the general store, forcing him to travel 2 days to a trading post where his reputation had not yet spread. He received 2 letters, both unsigned, telling him that Apache lovers deserved to die with the Apaches, that he should leave the territory while he still could, that his farm would burn if he did not send the savage boy away. Isaac read these letters while Nolly sat at the table learning to write English words on a slate Isaac had found in an abandoned schoolhouse, and he thought about how strange it was that the people threatening violence were calling this child the savage. Nolly's shoulder healed slowly, leaving a scar that would mark him forever. And as he grew stronger, he began helping with the farm work, his quick hands better at weeding between the corn rows than Isaac's stiff fingers. They worked in silence mostly, the poor farmer and the Apache boy, 2 outcasts tending crops in a land that wanted them gone. And Isaac found a kind of peace in that shared labor that he had never felt in all his years of solitary struggle. The boy was smart, learned English with a speed that amazed Isaac, and began teaching the farmer words in Apache that described the plants and animals of this desert in ways that English had no names for. In those exchanges, Isaac began to understand that the West had been savage to everyone, that Apache and settler alike were caught in a cycle of violence and fear that served no one's interests except those who profited from the hatred. The confrontation Isaac had been dreading came in late October when Taggart returned with 6 men and a rope, their faces hard with the kind of righteous anger that comes from believing your cruelty is justified. They found Isaac and Nolly harvesting the last of the corn, their hands stained green from the husks, and Taggart announced that they were taking the Apache boy to face justice for crimes committed by his people. Isaac stepped between them and Nolly, his infected leg finally healed, but still weak, and he said that the boy had committed no crimes, that he was a child who had been shot in the back while running away, and that if they wanted him, they would have to go through Isaac first. The men spread out in a semicircle, their hands near their weapons, and Isaac could see in their faces that they had already decided this was the day they would cleanse their territory of both the Apache boy and the traitor who protected him. What happened next would be retold in contradictory versions for years afterward. But the essential truth was that Nolly stepped out from behind Isaac and spoke in clear English about what had happened, about how he and his friends had only been looking at the horses, about how the shooting had started without warning, about how he was the only one who had escaped alive. He spoke without pleading or crying, his young voice steady and clear. And he said that if these men needed to hang someone to satisfy their anger, he would accept that fate if they promised not to harm Isaac Brennan, who had shown him the only kindness he had known since his father died. The words hung in the air like a judgment. This Apache child offering himself to save the poor farmer who had saved him. And Isaac saw something shift in the faces of at least 3 of the men, saw them recognize the savage courage it took for a 12-year-old to stand ready for death. Taggart seemed to sense his support wavering and moved toward Nolly with the rope, but one of the other riders, a young man named Collins, whose own son was about Nolly's age, put his hand on Taggart's arm and said that maybe they had this wrong, that maybe hanging a child for looking at horses was the kind of thing that made them know better than the worst stories told about Apache cruelty. The tension stretched tight enough to break, and Isaac knew that the next few seconds would determine whether he and Nolly lived or died, whether the West would choose mercy or continue its cycle of savage reprisal. Then Collins said that his conscience would not allow this, that he was riding home and wanted no part of hanging children. And when he turned his horse and left, 2 others followed, leaving Taggart and 3 men against Isaac and Nolly and the weight of their own uncertainty. Taggart stood there holding the rope, his face red with fury and something that might have been shame, and he told Isaac that this was not over, that protecting an Apache would bring consequences Isaac could not imagine. Then he and his remaining supporters rode away, and Isaac collapsed to his knees in the cornfield, his whole body shaking with relief and exhaustion. Nolly knelt beside him and put a small hand on Isaac's shoulder, and in that moment of connection between the poor farmer and the injured Apache boy he had saved, both of them understood what the West had tried to teach them, that being savage meant abandoning your humanity to satisfy the mob's bloodlust, and that refusing to be savage meant accepting exile from your tribe in exchange for keeping your soul intact. The corn harvest that year was the best Isaac had ever grown, and he sold it at the distant trading post for enough money to survive another season. Nolly stayed through the winter, his presence both a comfort and a constant reminder of the choice Isaac had made. And in the spring, a group of Apache women appeared at the edge of the farm, Nolly's mother among them, come to retrieve the son they had thought dead. Isaac watched the reunion with a mixture of joy and sorrow, knowing that Nolly would leave, but also knowing that what had passed between them could not be erased by separation. The boy's mother approached Isaac with a dignity that defied every stereotype the settlers told themselves about Apache savages, and through Nolly's translation, she thanked the poor farmer for saving her son when his own people would have let him die. They left at dawn the next day, Nolly turning back once to wave at Isaac standing in front of his cabin, and then they disappeared into the mountains where the Apache band still ranged free. Isaac never saw the boy again, though sometimes in the years that followed, he would find small gifts left at the edge of his property, a beaded pouch or a carved wooden figure, and he knew that Nolly remembered the poor farmer who had chosen mercy when the West demanded savage justice. Taggart and his supporters never forgave Isaac for protecting an Apache child, and he remained an outcast from settler society until the day he died. His farm always struggling, his reputation forever marked as the fool who loved Indians more than his own kind. But in the quiet moments of his solitary life, Isaac Brennan would think about the choice he had made and know that the West had shown him its savage heart. And in refusing to let that savagery claim his own heart, he had saved more than an injured Apache boy. What the West did was savage in its demand for absolute tribal loyalty, savage in its insistence that mercy toward the enemy was betrayal, savage in the way it tried to force good people into becoming monsters. Isaac Brennan, a poor farmer with a failing corn crop and an infected leg, had stood against that savagery not with weapons or wealth, but with the simple, stubborn insistence that a child's life mattered regardless of which side of an invented line that child had been born on. The West called him a traitor and an Apache lover and a fool. But Isaac had learned that sometimes the most savage thing you can do is remain human when the world demands you be something less, and that the price of mercy is often exile from your tribe, but freedom from becoming the monster they wanted you to be. The frontier demanded you choose sides, but Isaac Brennan had chosen something the savage West could not comprehend. He had chosen to see an injured child instead of an enemy, to offer protection instead of punishment, to risk everything rather than let fear and hatred dictate his actions. If this story of impossible choices and moral courage resonated in your soul, hit that subscribe button and share this video, because we need more stories about people who refuse to let the world's savagery turn them savage in return. And we need to remember that sometimes a poor farmer standing in a doorway defending an Apache boy teaches us more about true courage than 1,000 tales of conquest and revenge.